They used to call me Easy D, Easy D, Easy D, Easy.
This is Dan Easy D Dorman. 5 easy questions. Today's going to be a great interview. I've just burnt the first 20 minutes of my Zoom just talking. And so it was okay, we got to take this to the stage, as my boy George would say. I met this person at an AI hip hop symposium. Now, that all by itself was an interesting reason to go. Um, I found out that her and her company put the event forward. Now it's like, oh, that's cool. I don't know how the things were merged, and maybe we'll talk about it, maybe not. But then I found out that her and her partner, and we'll get into if she has more than one because I really don't know, but she's a venture capitalist. And I don't know anything about venture capitalism other than what I learned from Tony Stark and CNBC and Fox Business. And yes, I watch Fox, not all the time, but I do. So without further ado, here is Monica Poole Knox from Good Trouble Ventures.
Hey, here we are. Hello, Easy D. Nice to see you. Nice to be here to chat with you today.
The pleasure is going to be all mine because I'm going to learn far more from this conversation today than I certainly never thought I would. Like a lot of folks, and this is going to go into multi-part question. Oh, let me warn you. I'm OCD, so when it's 5 easy questions, it ain't 6.
I already knew that's where you were going. I'm
Okay. Well, there we go. Well, yeah, because of what you do, I'm sure you got a spot. You got to, get a sense of the person. So I get that. So here's the multi-part question.
okay.
What is a venture capital?
That is so funny because in your introduction, when you said I was a venture capitalist, I said, oh my goodness, should I be offended? Thought of myself as a venture capitalist, but I absolutely am. So, a person who does venture capital, or I should say venture capital funds, are in the business of sometimes they raise money, sometimes they use their own money, of finding outstanding founders who are building fantastic companies and invest in that founder and their team and their companies to help them scale faster. So it's kind of a newer concept as it relates to just business in general. I think, traditionally businesses, if you look back into, the 20s and the 30s, you wanted to start a business, you started a business. And from the profits of that business, you reinvested the business and you built the business.
Mhm.
It takes longer to do that way, but was kind of the traditional way that you would start a business. And of course, if your family had money or had access to money, you might be able to do something a little bit faster. But it was very individual, very much about what you yourself could drive in terms of your profits and revenues for the company in terms of the success of your company. But what a venture capital fund does is it accelerates that growth instead of that company having to, you know, kind of figure out where to go get money to either hire employees with skill sets that they need, or whether to, if they're in manufacturing, they may need to purchase a particular set of machinery. They may need marketing dollars to advertise their business. Instead of them having to wait until they raise the money where they have enough to do that, what a venture capital fund does is infuses the money into the organization for a particular return. So they are an investor, simply as an investor. It's saying, hey, we're going to give you some funds so you don't have to worry about that. We believe in you, we trust you. And from that, build your business. And we're your partner, your financial partner along the way. Now, our fund is a little bit different because we provide both financial capital and what we call strategic capital. So we can talk a little bit more about that.
What separates Good Trouble Ventures from the others?
Yeah. Oh gosh, let's see. How much time is that in the
I
show?
will send you
Um,
links all day, homegirl.
no, all kidding aside, I mean, look, the premise of venture capital that I laid out is going to be fairly similar across, any venture fund. Um, and I should have shared also that venture capital tends to invest in earlier stage companies whereas private equity funds tends to invest in later stage companies. So that's the differentiation between the two, because I hear that question quite a bit.
Mhm.
Certainly there are exceptions, but that's generally the case. That is the case with Good Trouble Ventures as well. We invest in early stage companies. So these are companies that we consider pre-seed, seed, or Series A. That means they're typically within their first, 3, 4 years of being a company. So they're just getting started. Sometimes they've made a little bit of money, what we call post revenue. Sometimes they're pre-revenue. Sometimes they haven't yet turned a dollar. We invest at the intersection of tech, so emerging tech, meaning AI, all forms of AI, Web3, blockchain, any type of emerging tech, and entertainment. And by entertainment, we mean music, film, media, sports, gaming, and creator economy. It also could be, did I miss one? Music, film, media, sports, gaming, creator economy. I think I got them all. So it can be any form of entertainment is really what we're investing in. One of the things that we always try to do is first find outstanding founders. I always thought before I got into venture capital, and I can talk a little bit about what I did prior to this, um, you really had to be this fantastic just finance person, like just the numbers, just the numbers. And some venture funds run their funds that way. But with all of the research and all the studies that we've seen, and quite frankly, even people who've been in venture for a very long period of time, experience will show that even if you have a fantastic business idea, if you don't have the right founder, you don't have the right talent, you don't have the right team that founder might attract and retain, you're going to have a hard time building a successful business. So it's very interesting to see when we talk about companies like a Twitter or like Twitch or other companies that we consider in this kind of media slash entertainment space, um, kind of the whole premise of their company. It started out as one thing, like if you think about Twitch, which is a very successful video streaming company today, they started out as what was called Justin TV, which was the name of the founder. Um, so we provide financial capital. We invest in amazing founders. We call them category creating founders, founders that are not, as we say, trying to figure out how to, make a horse run faster, but they're actually trying to figure out how do we build an automobile, right? Something that's slightly different. And then we invest anywhere between, 500,000 to 1.5 million to get them started. And we stay with them. We provide financial capital, but then the strategic capital we provide is also coaching, it's guidance, it's mentorship. We have an amazing coalition of folks, and many of them you met when you were at the San Francisco, hip hop event
Mhm.
called that Cultural Renaissance with the AI capitalized. Um, these are folks that are Grammy Award winning, music composers, producers. They are award winning film directors. These folks are in the sports and gaming space. They are also executives. They're C-level folks that have a background in finance or marketing. So basically, the strategic capital that we provide to our founders helps them, accelerate the knowledge. So we accelerate the growth of the business financially, but then we accelerate the knowledge of these folks by pairing them with folks who are more seasoned, who've been there, done that, and are willing to help them grow the business.
Okay. Now, again, you're reading my notes because I was getting ready to ask the third part of this question was, how did you get into this?
Okay. Well, my path is very non-traditional. And I would tell you, Easy D, that a lot of people say to me, like, wow, I've always wanted to get into venture. How did you do it? And I feel very badly because my path was not traditional in any way, shape, or form. It can be very challenging to get into venture. There's a history behind that. In some ways, it's intentional. And so we can talk about that too. But I started out on the corporate side. I did my undergraduate in communications, my MBA from the University of Texas, and always just loved business. I just wanted to go in to be a corporate executive. And so, I started out my career on that path, worked primarily for tech and entertainment companies, companies like Microsoft, where I spent, quite a bit of time. I worked for Twitter, the old Twitter, not X. So prior to that transition, I worked for Sony, and then I also worked for companies like CBS on the interactive side. I worked for the Walt Disney Company, ABC. So I had a blend between um, tech and entertainment. My background always was in people, culture, and leadership. So I was always in some kind of role where I was leading through kind of manage the management of the human capital. I made that transition from corporate to venture by starting investing. I just started investing in companies that I really thought were cool. Um, and why, how did that happen? A lot of times I was just meeting these founder CEOs. Sometimes it was on LinkedIn, sometimes it was in an event, and where there were some synergies there. Share my background. A lot of times people can look you up now in a nanosecond. And I had capital to invest, and then they were like, "Hey, can you be an advisor?" So I said, "Okay." So I did that. And I would say for me, my process was to take a step back. I guess if there's anything I can share that I learned through how do you maneuver through that transition, it's to take a step back, really do an inventory of what you love to do and focus on that. And then, I feel like by doing that, this whole under other industry, which I never envisioned myself in, emerged. By taking a step back, I took myself out of the driver's seat. Quite frankly, this was involved a lot of prayer, a lot of just saying, okay, I'm surrendering here. And I'm going to do what I love to do. So that's where the investing started. I have to also share with you, I have a son. We were talking earlier about our kids.
Mhm.
Yeah, he's a Division I football player, and anybody who knows me knows that I'm going to tell you that in the first 5 minutes that I talked to you. I'm very proud of him. He made straight A's last semester. He's on the dean's list. He's academic All-American, all the things, and he's a fantastic football player. But his senior year, we were crazy on the road. And so I was taking him to recruiting trips. I was taking him to all these camps, and any parent who has Division I, athletic child, male, female, regardless of the sport, understands what I'm talking about. Um, that senior year happened right after I decided to step away from my kind of corporate career.
Wow.
And there was no way, Easy D, that I could have done that as a mother if I had been working my crazy corporate job. So again, it was stepping back, doing what I was really passionate of doing, not just on the professional side, but also on the personal side, because I had a son who was pursuing this goal that required a lot of my time.
Mhm.
And I never could have given that time if I had been so wrapped up in my corporate roles. And so now he's on full scholarship at a D1 university, and he has goals and dreams, and I get to support him in other ways. But you know, I really do believe that when you do take inventory of your skills and you give yourself some space and let yourself be guided in prayer and kind of take yourself out of the driver's seat, the right thing will emerge, and it may not be exactly what you anticipated. And that's how I found my way to venture.
I'm going to try and squeeze this in because, and I moved it around. This was originally question 4, but when we spoke last week, you went into deep detail about the whole VC landscape and the role of women and minorities in this space or the lack thereof. Why do you think it's multi-part question again? Why do you think there's a gap?
Well, I mean, historically, venture was set up to be exclusionary. Venture capital was generally, it started, back in the 60s, 70s is where you're going to start to see history emerge. Coming from communities that were sent, kids going to Ivy League schools. Wasn't a lot of women that were in venture capital at the time. This was also families with money, right? Because you need money. This is one of the reasons why a lot of women and people of color are not in the space. Because historically, our families haven't had just extra millions of dollars to invest. And I'm not talking about like $50. I'm talking about multi-millions of dollars to invest. And so who had that kind of money? They were folks that were more kind of coming out of elite schools. They were primarily male, straight, more, white male. That was the picture of a venture capitalist if you look up at the history. But I think with the advent of all the things that have democratized access to information that we have now that we didn't have then, it's just opened up um, the aperture for anybody who's interested to come in. With women coming into the workplace and learning how to save and learning how to invest, now women are coming in, right? So there's been a history of venture being for a very small percentage of folks, but I think with different people coming into the workplace, and now with access to information, you can look up just about anything you want to learn, certainly on any kind of internet or chat GPT or whatever you're using. People are just starting to learn about this asset class. Traditionally, I will tell you, women founders get less than 2% of venture capital funding.
Wow.
For people of color, it's a very small percentage. And so there's created a demand to say, hey, we want to work with venture capital funds that will just evaluate our idea and not get into all the other things, that may be just distracting. And so what is that? Now there's a demand for venture capital funds who would be willing to fund founders that are very diverse now. And
Mhm.
so those dynamics have created now this landscape. It's still, don't get me wrong, Easy D, it's not crazy massive amounts of women and crazy massive amounts of folks that don't fit that description that I shared earlier in venture fund, but it is changing. And so that's something I'm very passionate about. I want whoever's interested in this space and loves business and thinks they can be helpful to a company, there shouldn't be any, barriers to entry.
We're going to
Okay.
go into part two of this, and I'm going to give you a heads up on the question.
They used to call me Easy D, Easy D, Easy